Sam Ceder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Joining us now from Netroots Nation, Ryan Grimm, reporter at his newly founded venture, multiple founded venture, Dropsite News, co-host of Counterpoints. Ryan, welcome back to the program.
And can we pause while everybody goes to dropsitenews.com and signs up to get barraged by our emails? All right. There, everybody good? You got it?
No,
Okay,
I have no problem spending a little more time promoting your site. I mean, the work that you guys have done over the years at The Intercept, really important work. You made this point when you were bragging in your newsletter that you are an award-winning journalist, but yet you have not ended up at Punchbowl or at Politico or Axios or any of these sites. I mean, you're at Netroots Nation. There's, I would imagine, to the extent that there's anybody from any of those outfits there, I doubt they are, but to the extent that they are, they're there just sort of like looking at the animals in the zoo.
Yes, if Politico's here, it's to try to catch somebody saying something, like off message, and just light it up. Yeah,
indeed. And Scahill's done amazing work for at least 20 years, starting at Democracy Now!, if I remember correctly, and at The Nation. And so I can't encourage people to go and support this endeavor enough. I know you're bringing over some more people from The Intercept. I know The Intercept doesn't know who they are yet, so we don't need to be explicit about that. But
and yes, and Emma wouldn't understand this because she's not Gen X like us. But the bragging that I put in that newsletter that you mentioned, it was hard to do. But the point is a key one. It's like, because we won this Pulitzer at the Huffington Post, because we won the Pope, because Jeremy was an Oscar nominee for his documentary about his book, like those credentials give us entry into the kind of mainstream media ecosystem, such that when we report something, they listen. So that when we reach out to comment, they respond.
An appeal to authority. Now, I'm not gonna to begrudge you that. I think it's good. I mean, I'm really excited to read more of your stuff because the early work that you have to launch the site, the Hamas interview, and then also this UAW story. You're off swinging, Ryan.
A couple of doubles off the fence there.
I want to talk about that Borowski story in a minute, dealing with the UAW. But first, let's just start. You're at Netroots Nation. I haven't been in several years, but back in the day when I think we were the first, the Majority Report may have been the first program ever to broadcast from Netroots Nation back when it was yearly co's 20 years ago now, I guess, in 2000.
Yeah, this is the 19th. Yep.
All right, so it was 20.
I just saw that on their brochure. This is the 19th. Yep.
And in Vegas, how does this one start? I think you were at that one, if I remember correctly, or at least 2006, maybe.
Or one of the Vegas ones. Yeah.
Yeah. How does it compare?
I think it's similar to how it has been over the last, say, 5 to 10 years, in the sense that it kind of transitioned into almost a kind of like professional left gathering for kind of people that work in like progressive campaigns, digital media, consulting firms that work with like progressive clients, rather because the blogosphere, such as it was, like doesn't really exist anymore. Like Coast is the last kind of is there anything left from the blogosphere?
Eskaton,
I mean, Huffington Post is still going.
Atrios, that's true. And Hullabaloo.
Atrios is going. Hullabaloo's going.
Digby, yeah.
Yeah. But there used to be, every state had a whole bunch of bloggers that would come together and that would cover their own capital and uncover the corruption there, and be ripping apart the proto Tea Party Republicans, which were then proto MAGA Republicans. So it kind of feels a little more professional. But you look around and I'm sure if a Republican came here, they'd be like, "You call this professional? This is a bunch of crunchy hippies."
Right.
But yeah, but they show up on time for their Zooms and deliver their work product. So.
So more institutional. There's no blogosphere, and you guys are there obviously to get the word out of your new endeavor. I want to talk about one story before we get to the Biden stuff, which of course is like, I imagine it's dominating the conversation there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you can say that.
What this story about Neil Barofsky, and I remember him from being the inspector general, I think, from the TARP program, and being one of the people who came out and spoke against Geithner's whole plan in trying to rescue, well, for Geithner's perspective, the banking industry, and from everybody else's perspective, all the homeowners who were underwater on their homes. Barofsky seems to have overstepped his boundaries in monitoring the UAW. Tell us about that story.
Yeah, like he was a kind of a heroic figure back during the Wall Street bailout years. Like that, he was one of the champions that people were looking to going after Wall Street, and Wall Street was constantly complaining that Barofsky was just being kind of too rough on them, and it was absolutely delightful to watch. This around, he actually had so the UAW has a federal monitor because of these corruption scandals in the recent past that led to 2 consecutive presidents of the UAW getting federal prison sentences for corruption. And so in lieu of UAW itself, like getting broken up and prosecuted, it was put under this consent decree, which means that the federal government for a period of time has this like unchecked power to reform the thing. And the first part of it worked great. Like they forced the UAW to allow the rank and file to elect their president directly. And what that did is it led to the election of a left-wing reformer, Sean Fain, who then led the stand-up strike against the Big Three, the six-week-long strike that brought the automakers to their knees and delivered absolutely kind of record-breaking contract gains for the auto workers. And in the wake of that, he and the UAW have been able to expand their organizing into previously non-union places, battery plants, electric vehicles, etc. So that part was working, and he had a pretty good relationship with Neil Barofsky, the monitor. Then after October 7th, that changed. So on November 30th, December 1st, the UAW became the first major union to call for a ceasefire. Barofsky, as he later told Sean Fain, had kind of attended some of the protests in New York and found them to be offensive and anti-Semitic. Barofsky is a major outspoken supporter of Israel and has been for many years. So Sean Fain was scheduled to do a press conference with Rashida Tlaib, Cori Bush, Ro Khanna, other members of Congress calling for a press conference in mid-December. And Barofsky called Sean Fain the night before to tell him, that he thought that this was a terrible idea, that this whole thing was anti-Semitic, and that what really wasn't the UAW's place to be getting involved in this situation. And he said, "Look, this was a vote of the executive board. This was our locals weighed in on this. The UAW sponsored the March on Washington. MLK's March on Washington. The UAW was for, was against apartheid South Africa. You can argue about whether the UAW ought to do these things, but the UAW has been maybe the most kind of socially conscious major union of any of them. So this was like well within what they do. And also he said, look, this is really not appropriate. And Barofsky said, I'm only calling you in a strictly personal capacity, not as the federal monitor. And he said,
that is extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary. I mean, people could take issue with what positions the UAW has, but the idea that you're the monitor and you're calling as just a personal, what kind of relation are they, buddies? What context? This is. I mean,
I guess they text, but
that just seems extraordinary.
Their only relationship is this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why?
And so then in February.
Yeah. Well, no, continue, because I'm curious as to why we're finding out about this.
Yeah, so in February, then there's another board meeting, a quarterly board meeting. So he didn't usually go to the board meetings, and he missed the one where they approved the ceasefire resolution. So in February, he came to that quarterly meeting, and he weighs in as the federal monitor at the meeting. He zooms in remotely, And he says, look, I've heard from the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League thinks that, what one of your locals here in New York was doing is wrong, and that the ceasefire is giving fuel to anti-Semitism. He said, I've gone to protests and I've seen the UAW wheel. He said, it pains me to see the UAW wheel, being held up by protesters at these pro-Palestine or anti-war demonstrations. And the board confronted him back and said, Neil, like, this is completely inappropriate. Like, we have an agenda here. Like, we're not, like, this is
not his job.
This is not anywhere within your remit. Like, you're not on our political team. Like, this is the members' call. You're not a UAW member. And so they then sent, their lawyer sent him a letter kind of re-expressing those thoughts. After Borofsky also sent them an email, because he got a complaint from the ADL about something that happened with a local that called for a ceasefire, and he forwarded that ADL complaint to the board and said these are very serious concerns that should be addressed. And he confirmed in that letter, and I previously expressed these concerns to Sean back in December, directly in a personal capacity. He added, and so the UAW lawyer wrote back, like, saying, this is just, Neil, this is insanely inappropriate. Like, you have to stop doing this. So then 6 days later, Borofsky sends the union this sweeping demand for records, saying that he wants all text messages, between all of these people from February 12th, which is around the time the ADL out to Borofsky, February 12th to February 23rd, which was when the union sent this letter to Borofsky. He wants all text messages that Sean Fain sent between his lawyers and his and his like senior staff, and all emails and all records, and also a sweeping set of other documents that would have added up to like hundreds of thousands of records, and said he was going to investigate something that had been raised at the last board meeting. Basically, at that same meeting where Borofsky was complaining about the ceasefire, Sean Fain had stripped the secretary's treasurer of some of her official duties. They were in a dispute about organizing tactics, and it played out not behind the scenes, but at the board meeting, and put to a vote, and the board moved like, yes, we're with Sean Fain. We disagree with what the secretary treasurer did. Secretary treasurer complained to Borofsky that it was unfair, and so he said, I'm opening a federal investigation into this situation, and I want all of these records. And so they have spent the last 4 months kind of in court fighting about whether they have to turn over all of these records. And so and Borofsky just opened announced that he'd opened a new investigation into Sean Fain. And so he kind of keeps doing this, and so I think that's why we have learned about the kind of background here.
Yeah, I had seen the stuff about the investigations, and then had seen reports of that first. Is there no appeal process? Is like, does Neil Borofsky have total, carte blanche to do whatever he wants? I mean, because there's no. First of all, you don't send an official notice that you shouldn't be protesting about a ceasefire and then reference a supposed personal conversation, right? Right. Like that's proof. That's like Elon Musk saying to Don Lemon, there's no contract, but the contract's off. You can't, yes. you can't do both those things and maintain them. But is there no, does Neil Borofsky not have a boss or an appeal process for what he's been doing?
His boss would be Judge David Lawson, who's a Clinton appointee at the Eastern District of Detroit. We reached out to him for comment, and they said, hey, we don't have a press person. We'll get to this as soon as we can. They have been basically complaining to the judge. The judge appointed Borofsky, and so the judge could weigh in and say, okay, this is overboard. So the Department of Justice could in perhaps on one side or the other. They declined to comment for the article as well. They said although they were declining to comment for now, which I thought was kind of interesting, something along those lines. So yes, they'd have to go to the judge, but the judge basically has unchecked power because the union gave away all their power.
Right.
in exchange for not getting.
And we should say they did this before
broke it up.
Fein. This is all of this stuff predates
Right,
Fein.
exactly.
Interesting story.
Right, and Borowski could have wrapped it up within the boxes of the consent decree. After Fein was elected, after he kind of reformed the union, after he won the big stand-up strike, it was well within Borowski's mandate to say, "We're good. Like, this was a big success. We're done with this." And UAW is now, no, you're like an owl that can go fly again. But so take them to court, prosecute them. He can do a lot under his mandate unless the judge steps in.
Did you say an owl that can go fly free again?
Yeah, let's say the UAW broke its wing and was brought in by the Federal Monitor and nursed back to health.
Is that some
You're walking
is
out
that
the
an idiom I'm
backyard.
not aware of? Like, why an owl?
Go. I just made it right now.
Okay. All right. I was just checking on that. Like, I wasn't sure if that was like an old union idiom. Like, we're an owl.
No, I'm dropping new material here.
It's like that Mr. Take This Broken Wing song.
Yeah, no.
Yes.
I got it. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.